Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first session of the 5 Foot View webinar series. My name's Jen Leiden. I'm a CFO consultant at 5 Foot View, and I'm excited to be your host today. I operate in the business to government space and B2B space, and I have some really good consultants here who are going to talk about the speed of decision making. We have, based on our feedback from many of our clients, so this is something that's coming up frequently across organizations of all sizes, small family businesses, large multinationals. Speed can be a key competitive advantage or disadvantage, and it often makes the difference between winning and losing in today's volatile market. To explore this topic and bring valuable perspectives, I'm joined by a fantastic panel of experts from the 5 Foot View Collective who will share insights drawn from their experiences. Joining me today are Mary Homan, Chief of Staff, Integrator Consultant, Marjorie Van Kierken, CEO, COO Consultant, Eric Peterson, CFO Consultant, and Damian Stelzer, CEO, CFO Consultant. Let's get started with some of the key questions and challenges we consistently hear from our clients. So, our first question on the speed of decision making, what is the single most impactful change you typically recommend to speed up decision making, and why does that work? Damien, let's start with you.
Okay, thank you. And hi, everyone. I think this is an excellent question. And what I usually do is, when I am with a client for something like that, I review the approval matrix and a delegation of authority. In many of the cases, I found that, this is a quick win. You can just remove some unnecessary bureaucracy. And because, in many companies, decision tends to be centralized in the CEO or general manager. That's a very common thing. Actually, I did it myself when I was the general manager in a mid-size company. Like every approval when I started would, start coming to me, and I just didn't have the time to approve everything. So what it is, I delegated and gained a lot of speed and accountability without losing control. This is the very common issue. I also seen in very, small, medium-sized organizations. They usually grow, and as they grow, there's no physical time for the CEO or the GM to handle 100% of the requests.
Very good. Thank you, Damien. Mary, what do you think about that?
Well, I think Damien makes an excellent point. I would add that depending on the decision and impact of others, um, driving engagement and buy-in from everyone involved is also important. Using something like the RACE model is a good tool. Who is responsible? Who is accountable? Who needs to be informed? Who needs to be consent? Where the consent needs to go. Anyway, clarifying all of those helps ensure that everyone who needs to know knows, everybody who needs to be part of the process is part of the process. That at the end of the day helps clarify and helps make sure there's a buy-in from everybody involved.
Good point. Eric, how about you?
All right. Well, thank you very much. And Damien and Mary bring up some fantastic points. I'm going to come at it from a little bit different of an angle. They're looking at it from the process side. I'm going to come at it from the people side, making sure that people really truly understand the data needed to drive the decision. And this lack of understanding can actually drag these decisions out, can cause follow-up meetings, things like that. And what I have found is when you're in these discussions, people aren't very willing to raise their hand and say, I don't understand, especially when you're into the financial information. I think most people are expected that part of their job is that they understand how to read the P&L. And I have found multiple scenarios where people don't understand and they hesitate, slow down their decision because they're not really sure. And so what I've been trying to do is I will spend time with people individually. I try to either recognize that beforehand or just after the meeting and sit down with them and try to give them the one-on-one opportunity to seek understanding without causing or creating an issue in the meeting by slowing some things down. And so I've really tried to focus on making sure everyone is up to speed on the data and the knowledge so that they can make that decision quickly. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. And um, Maria, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so for me, I work in very fast-paced industries, right? And so whatever was true today is typically not true tomorrow. And I feel like that's almost every industry these days. So I totally believe in fixing some of the decision-making mechanics that Damien and Mary talked about, and Eric to an extent too. I do also feel that often the challenge is that we're not aligned anymore behind what the actual decision is that we're trying to make and why now. Um, and I think that happens more frequent than we believe, that we're not actually all on the same path to make the same decision, or that there might not be alignment on what's in and out of scope to talk about and to all evaluate or look at, or that by now something has grown into three decisions. So as an example that you may realize, right, you might be going to a store to look at new seating for your living room, and you're thinking that you're making a decision on new seating, whilst your wife has decided that by now it turned into a complete overhaul of the living room, right, including all the other bits and pieces. And we
Mhm.
laugh about those examples, but that happens in business all the time, right? That we think we're just making this decision in isolation about seating, while somebody else is looking at a much larger picture. And there's many variables that can play into that. So to me, the value is in having a discussion and going back to saying, what's the decision that we're trying to make, what's in and what's out, and why now? Where does this fit in into what else we're trying to do? And what is it that we need to know to start making a move? And are we potentially trying to decide too much at the same time, right? So a good conversation on going back to what are we trying to get to? And if people have been working the decision for a while, I feel that they then have the puzzle pieces. So once you're back aligned on what's the decision we're trying to make, it usually only takes a little bit of work to now close the loop.
Thank you. Damien was able to walk us through the structure, delegation, and authority. And by removing any unnecessary layers, Mary gave us the human side. The RACI ensures people aren't just compliant, they're committed. And Eric gave us the intelligence layer. None of it works if the decision makers don't actually understand the data in front of them. What I'd add is in the thread that ties all three together is the speed is a byproduct of trust. You speed up decisions when leaders trust their teams enough to delegate, like Damien described. You reduce friction when employees trust that the process is fair and inclusive, which is what Mary's RACI model builds. And you eliminate wasted meeting time when everyone um, are slow to make decisions. Because the data existed, but the confidence to act in it didn't. So my practical add is this: decision making speed is also a training issue. If your managers can't read a P&L, interpret a variance report, or challenge an assumption, you always need more meetings. Build the structure, engage the hearts, and develop the financial literacy of your team and watch how fast things. Okay, on to the second question. How do you balance data-driven decision making with the need to act quickly when data is incomplete? Mary, let's start with you.
Okay, thank you. In companies that I support, which is typically the under 100 million fast growing, scaling fast companies, data is often incomplete. So waiting for the perfect information isn't practical. In the situations, I like to make sure that everyone, the team is aligned around the problem, the stakes, the decision-making time frame. We can leverage the collective knowledge and experience of the team. Those closest to the work itself often have insights that the data alone can't provide. We combine that critical data with the informed judgment, test the assumptions and the options, move forward with the best decision at the time. Equally important is to follow up on those decisions, checking to make sure that they're playing out as we expect them to and adjust as needed.
Thanks, Mary. And Damien, how about you?
Yeah, the phrase that I always like to use in this case is it's always better to be approximately right versus being exactly wrong. And I use it all the time. And I'm going to give you an example of how I used this in the past. I was part of a board of directors of a family business, and we need to make a decision quickly whether to consolidate three manufacturing sites in two. And at that time, we didn't have all the necessary data that we needed or that everybody liked to be more comfortable with the decision. But the cost of waiting was too high. The company at that time was in red, and the decision needed to be made, quickly to stop the bleeding. So even though we're not 100% certain of, closing one plant, which plant to close, the data that we had was enough to say, well, this is probably not absolutely the best alternative, but at a minimum, we knew this would reduce enough the cost to make the business profitable again quickly. So we moved ahead, we moved on with the decision, and focus our efforts in other areas of the business that really needed more attention.
Yeah, good move on your part, Damien. And Eric, how about you?
Those are great points by Mary, Damien, and kind of leveraging off the first question, right? You can't really always wait for data to be available to you because it will slow down your decision-making process. So one of the things that I always take a look at as well is you need to move and move with speed. And because you don't have that data, sometimes it's best to think about the end result as well. And so I like to come at it with an exit strategy, developing a few key KPIs that allow us to continually mark how we're doing and where we're tracking. And if we start to fall off our pace, then that gives us the ability to say, if we need to exit, this isn't a stop what we're doing and try to develop a strategy in probably a little bit of a chaotic situation. You can pull off, here's what we agreed to before we started. And we now know we need to exit this plan because it didn't meet these criteria along the way. And so what that allows us to do is to get out and do what I like to call, if you're going to fail, and nobody wants to fail, we don't plan for failure. But if you're going to fail, the best way to fail is to fail fast. And the way to do that is to be prepared to do that whenever you start down a journey, especially when you have limited data, because some of the data that does come in along the journey may cause you to want to make a different decision, and you're prepared for that decision.
Mm, good point, Eric. Margie, how about you?
Yeah, so I operate in high stakes environments, right, where the wrong decision cost lives or billions or country entries and exits for multinationals. And and I'm always a bit cynical when people say I don't have enough data because I think that's fact of life, right? We the world is so volatile and uncertain. You're gonna have to make decisions with incomplete data. But I'm acknowledging that there are situations where you really should have more data than you do. And what's the data for? The data is there to de-risk your decision making, right? So if your data is such that you cannot de-risk your decision making enough, right? And the consequences are such that I don't believe that standing still is an option at all. So I really abide by the things that Damien and Eric also brought up about you need to move and choose something, and imperfection is a good choice versus standing still. But ultimately, if the risk is too great, then make a different decision today. can you carve out a smaller decision or a smaller initial step? So rather than really have an exit or metrics to measure progress along that, really only make a decision that gets you to a next point enough that you do get progressive insight, right? If you do that, but you're not going to get any more data or better insight, then you might as well make the whole decision, right? The gamble is kind of equal. But can you make a shorter decision that it has a risk profile to it that you can deal with today, that you can absorb today, and do that, right? You have maybe the decision ultimately is too big or too risky to take today, but that's also a decision saying the risk profile of all that with what I don't know is too big. It needs to be
Yeah.
smaller. That's okay.
Yes,
That's still a decision and still moving.
spot on with that one. Great points, guys, all the way around. And they build on each other perfectly. Damien set the foundation. Waiting has a cost, and approximate is often better than late. Mary gave us the process, align the team, combine data and collective judgment, and stay close to the outcome. Eric added the piece that makes fast decisions feel safe. Design your exit before you enter. And Margie talked about de-risking the decisions. Pre-built checkpoints give teams the confidence to move quickly because the safety net is already in place. My only add as a CFO is one simple filter. If is this a one-way door or a two-way door? Reversible decisions should move fast with the data you have. Irreversible ones warrant more vigor. That question alone saves hours of unnecessary deliberation. Incomplete data is the norm. The winners aren't the ones who wait for certainty. They're the ones who built the discipline to act, measure, and adjust. Okay. And our last question for the day is, what are the typical consequences you've seen in the client's business for lacking speed on the decision making? Again, the consequences for lacking the speed. Eric, let's start with you this time.
Great. Thank you very much. And my focus has been typically more on the CPG kind of manufacturing from the finance lens. And I'm going to give a great example of something I experienced here recently where I think everybody has experienced this, right? Internal inflation because of, higher costs with inflation because of raw materials or because of plant costs or distribution costs, pick whatever you'd like, and it's driving pricing discussions. So we set up a pricing discussion, and it took about 6 to 8 weeks for us to actually get the meetings on the calendar because this person was delayed or this person was out of town. And by the time we got our own internal meetings done, this has nothing to do with external. We rolled it all out, we got it approved, we executed the pricing, and by doing that, we missed a quarter of pricing, all driven by just timely execution of internal meetings and approvals. Well, not only did that hurt, but it was really ironic that the first person to reach out to me was the one who was the most difficult to get onto the calendar for approval, was asking me why margins slipped in the past quarter. And trying not to, with a smile on my face, say it's because our own internal processes drove the delay and that delay cost us money. And that's something that I think is the biggest impact is your own internal lack of speed and lack of urgency that can negatively impact your P&L.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. You want to
Marcia, how
start
about
asking?
you?
Sorry.
Marcia, how about you? What do you think about what are the typical consequences you run into?
Yeah, to me, uh, again, in the fast-paced world, right? Not making decisions to me translate into the cost of doing nothing, which is substantial. I look at a business often as a ship out on the water, and if you don't make decisions, it doesn't mean nothing will happen, right? If you are not sure whether you should go into a new market or should copy what a competitor does or should address an underperforming situation, or you're not sure how to address it, and you keep on kind of looking at it from different angles, the world keeps moving, the water keeps moving around you, the weather is going to show up whenever it shows up. And so you're going to drift off course. And because the powers that be will move the ship regardless of what you decide. And chances are that 99% certain that you're drifting in a direction that is not what you wanted. So not
Hmm.
only are you slow and already behind the ball by the time you do make a decision, then you need to make up for the drift, right? The cost of doing nothing. How far back, further back did you get in that time that you didn't do anything? So to me, it's very fundamental. And you see it, it shows up in a business because people are doing busy work, right? They're not energized because they're regurgitating the same work, the same decisions. If you see lack of enthusiasm or energy, um, yeah, that's a sign that you're holding in place. Sometimes stress and people say it's too busy, it does feel you're at least probably making decisions, you're maybe not prioritizing. That's still a high energy situation, typically because things are moving. Stagnant is low energy, low buy-in, low enthusiasm. To me, that's a sign you're not making decisions and you're adrift.
Hmm. Good stuff. Damien, how about you?
I'm going to build on Eric's and Marcia's examples. I think they are very real. And if I had to say something about my experiences, I've seen all of that in many cases. And another good example that I can talk about is a specific client that I know that lost a large customer for being just too slow in something very simple. It was a temporary increase in the credit limit of that large customer. It took almost 2 months to get the internal approvals for many reasons. And the thing is, by the time it was approved, that client moved to a competitor. A competitor came with an attractive proposal, and my client just lost that important customer. So sometimes, as we said before, no decision is the worst decision of all. That's a great example of the consequences. And sometimes, waiting for too long, analyzing, debating before providing an answer, especially to a client, can erode credibility. And also, when you say nothing, then there's also room for unnecessary speculations from the other side. In this case, the client may think, no, they're not interested in doing business with me, and they went
Yeah.
with somebody else.
Yeah. Damien, I just wanted to briefly respond to your example because I think the advocates of the devil will say, like, well, if your decision would have been quick and you would have said, no, I'm not giving you that to the client, right? The
Yeah,
credit. I bet that that conversation would say, okay, we can't do that, but how else can we now work this relationship or do something
yeah,
else, right? So even a
okay,
quick no decision would have probably led
yeah,
to conversations about other ways to retain that client.
exactly, exactly. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. And Mary, what have you seen in terms of typical consequences?
So I find it interesting, particularly with my smaller clients. I've seen it go both ways. Sometimes a client will absolutely move too slowly. They'll miss the opportunity because the team was stuck in the day-to-day tactical. They're not even thinking about the long-term consequences strategically of what's going on with their decisions. I've also seen the opposite, which is decisions made in a vacuum or without considering the impact of that the decisions are having externally to the clients, but also internally to the team, leading to, of course, poor execution too. So can go either way, actually.
Yeah. I kind of find all of these examples to be all painfully familiar, right? Damien lost a customer to a competitor while 2 months of approvals were circling on people's desks. Eric missed an entire quarter of pricing Eric's client missed an entire quarter pricing, and the people who caused the delays were the first to question the margin pressure. Uh, Mary, you just framed both sides perfectly. Too slow, and you missed the opportunity. Too fast without alignment. You botched the execution. And Marcia, when we initially asked the question, you summed it up perfectly. If you're not making a decision, you're just floating around, and people and the environment are making the decision for you. So, the common thread there is the cost of slow decisions rarely shows up where the delay happened. It shows up on the P&L and customer attrition and the operational issues. It's a financial one, and you don't see it right away, but you do see it um, weeks later on the P&L, and it's revenue drain, really. So
Valuable.
slow decisions, they have a
Yeah.
price. It's almost always exceeds whatever risk the organization was trying to avoid by waiting. Right. All
Exactly.
right. So I'd love to continue this discussion, but unfortunately we're running out of time. I'd like to thank our panel of experts for sharing their insights and experiences. For those interested in this and our other topics, please send us your feedback, comments, questions, and let us know what other content you'd like us to cover in future webinars. We are a plethora of CXOs, so we bring many, many levels of experience as well as point of views. So we get excited when we have feedback from potential clients and just other CEOs out there that are struggling, that we can help share and add value to what you're going through every day. So thank you again to everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you, Jen, and
Thank you.
thanks everyone for watching.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.